everybody. Maybe some of you caught me on my recent interview on Relevant Radio, and I'm sure some of you are thinking, wow, Sister B has such an amazing story. Her life must be full of these incredible experiences of God. And I have to admit that I've had some really profound and incredible experiences of God during my life, but they are not constant. Day to day, I have to deal with the grind like anybody else. So how do we do that? How do we deal with spirituality when things get boring and kind of tedious? Stay tuned to find out what I have to say about that. How many of you have attended a retreat and it was a great experience? You connected with people, spirituality was awesome, you loved praying, it was easy, you just wanted to listen to Jesus music when you got back. But eventually the high tapered off, and you found yourself feeling like you're bottoming out, and things enter into a space of being tedious and unexciting once again. When we have real, profound spiritual experiences, sometimes it can be tempting to think that we're only connected to God if those spiritual experiences continue to feel consoling and awesome and exciting. When we return to the day-to-day life, it can be really disappointing because we just had this profound encounter with God, the one whom we desire, the greatest longing of our life. And sitting in the office, sitting in class, isn't so much fun anymore. What do we do? Well, let me tell you this. Jesus' disciples can totally relate to this experience. When thinking about feeling a little bit kind of bored in your spiritual life, it's in Luke chapter 9, starting at verse 28. It's the story of the Transfiguration. And you're probably familiar with this story, and I'm just going to read it to you quickly, and then I'm going to share a thought. It says, "Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James, and they went up the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of Jesus' face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white, kind of like mine. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory, and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory, and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, 'Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah,' not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them." That'd be kind of cool. "And from the cloud a voice came that said, 'This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him.' When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent, and in those days no one told anyone of the things they had seen." When we go on retreats and we have really profound spiritual experiences, it's kind of like a transfiguration moment. We go up the mountain with Jesus. He's transfigured before us. Moses and Elijah might appear. I mean, it's an experience that's out of the ordinary. We feel amazing. And what does Peter say in the scripture? He says, "Lord, it's good to be here." Of course it's good to be here. It feels awesome. But even Jesus and his disciples had to return to their ordinary life. And how did they do it? I think the key to that is paying attention to what the voice of the Father says in this story of Jesus. When Jesus is transfigured, the presence of God is revealed. And the Father says one very important thing. "This is my beloved Son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Listen to him. It's hard for us sometimes to listen. We're distracted by so many things. We're distracted by our phones, we're distracted by computers, we're distracted by work, stress. There's too much to do and not enough time. But we have to make time to listen to Jesus. If we come from a spiritual experience, a really great retreat, but we don't continue some kind of prayer practice, some kind of spiritual discipline, it's very difficult to carry the grace of that moment into our everyday life. There can be a huge disconnect. So whether it's committing to pray the rosary once a day, or spending 15 minutes reading scripture, or a certain amount of time speaking to God from the heart, which we should be doing anyway as part of our spiritual life. Having a commitment to those kinds of things trains us to listen to God in our everyday experience. Now, if God fed us with consolations all the time, we'd be so spiritually fat. It wouldn't be healthy for us. Nobody can live on candy all the time. You also need vegetables, you need meat, you need starch, protein, and then you're healthy. The same thing in the spiritual life. Sometimes God gives us cake, and it's awesome. Maybe it even has sprinkles on it, like my experience with the Eucharist. But most of the time, God's feeding us a really balanced diet. We might encounter things that are harder to eat than others, but in those moments, God is always with us. And by having a regular experience of prayer, we learn to listen to all the ways that God speaks to us. Not just the dazzling ways, not just the ways with sprinkles, but the everyday ways. And in those everyday moments, we develop a profound relationship with Christ that transforms us from within. And as we are transformed, our culture is transformed, which is the mission of every Christian. God bless.